All right. Hi, I'm Lorica. Today I will be talking to you about the difference between what and why. I'm one of these designers, actually, that Wojciech was just mentioning before. I work a lot with Sketch, I deliver with Zeppelin, and yeah. So I've been working as a UX designer for 9 years now as consultant. And there. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so as a consultant helping companies improve their apps, I focus mainly on mobile, and like over the past 9 years, I've worked on more than 20 apps I could count. This type of work I do because I really love the variety that you get working with different teams and organizations in different industries. And yeah, admittedly though, when I started back in 2010, I did a lot of concepts, design specs, not so much user research that I would have liked. And as the years have progressed, there's more user research being done, but still, it's very often that this is not valued and it's not prioritized everywhere. So today, I will talk a little bit about user research, like what's the whole point of it. I will share with you some insights that I've gained through all the projects that I worked on, and also some examples of how you can get in touch with users, even if you don't have like a massive budget or something like that for it. It doesn't have to be a massive user study, basically. But what I hear from companies that I work with is, well, user research, we don't have time, we don't have budget. But we have analytics and A/B tests. Awesome. But it's not quite user research. And I will give you an example from an app that I've had as a pet project for a long time. It's a time tracking app where you track your work time. And basically, it's very difficult to remember to start time tracking in the morning. So we added these reminders. So you set your start time, the reminder shows up if you haven't started working at that point. Awesome. We looked at the analytics, and we saw this is an awesome feature. A lot of people are forgetting, and we are reminding them. Cool. But then we got feedback from a user, and as he was describing how he used this, he said, I actually don't forget that often, but I use this as a quick start. So he would open the notifications and just start the app from there, or start the time directly from there. And there's a bit of a difference in these two. Maybe it's not totally apparent, but the solutions and how these features work may vary very much based off the interpretation versus the reality. But now, I actually have a question for you guys. What is it like in your company? Do you do any user research? Can you raise your hands? Or does your company do user research? Okay, not too bad, not too bad. Have you been part of conducting a usability test? Okay, that's fewer hands. Or like, conducting or listening in, actually, it's, But, okay, so what I want to do is now share some examples with you guys. Some examples of actual learnings from my work. And from user research, you gain a lot of different types of information. There's what users are struggling with, weird, wonderful, and unexpected ways that they use applications, and, well, who the user actually is. And the first example, if 6 of 6 of your user test participants have an issue with something, you better address it. This is an example from, we added a reply functionality within an app so that someone could reply to someone else. And we also added a later button there because we thought, okay, kind of like a dismiss. All of the people on the team thought this was a good idea, but the test user said, this doesn't work for us. We don't know what this means. So that's something we had to address. Also, users can be very blunt and honest. This was a user research session that we did testing a website. We had received a lot of text from a marketing department, and this user was saying, I'm so fed up with this text. It's really difficult to understand. Can you just write it plain and simple so I understand it? Basically, I found this super refreshing because this is a user saying, can you please keep this simple? Another example is one of my favorites, actually. It's a topic that came up during a user testing of an auctioning app. And this was actually not tested, a particular test in that, but just something that she mentioned when we were talking around it, so like in a discussion. And she would say, yeah, I set up a couple of auctions, and I make sure that they end roughly the same time during the day. And then when the time comes, I sit back and watch the money roll in. And it's, in a way, it's something that we hadn't considered that users do. Maybe you cannot do anything like with this particular piece of information, but it's an understanding of a user that you could maybe not possibly have guessed that they would do. Another one, a request that actually came into the time tracking app as an email. Someone said, I want to copy a note from one time entry to another. How can I do that? And I was thinking, okay, well, that should be possible. But why do you actually need to do that? This isn't how we intended it. So I asked for some background info, like what is it you're trying to do? What are you using it for? And she said, I'm a farmer, and I track what I plant. And this particular day, she had been planting, and she was interrupted, so she was planting her lettuces, and she stopped planting them, and then she started again, and she was putting that she was planting lettuces as the comment to this task. I can see many ways that this can be solved, and without having asked her what it was that she was trying to do or achieve, I would have had no idea. Also, there are farmers using my app. But one interesting thing to notice here is that usually when you get user requests, they ask you for a particular solution. They don't ask for, or they don't tell you what their problem is from the start. And if you act right away on that solution and just say, okay, let's make a quick link so they can just copy the comment, then you might end up with a subpar solution. Yeah, the next one is similar. Someone sent an email saying, I want to start a timer with a 10-minute delay. And again, it's like, not sure you should need that. Why are you requesting this? So he explained that he does telephone installations in northern Canada. And when it's minus 20 degrees, you simply don't want to take your phone out of your pocket or your hands out of your gloves to start a timer. So he wanted to start it before he went outside. And that's why he requested that. Now, we might not have a good solution for him for this particular problem because he's not every user, but having that insight of someone else with a different perspective and context, I think is very valuable. Additionally, it's not just about what I learn, but it's also about the reaction when having done some user research and presenting it to teams, that the reaction that you get from, for example, from a developer, where we had done, I think it was about 20 hours in total working on some user tests. And we found a lot of things to improve, but one of the things that they mentioned was, we launched this feature 4 years ago, and we had no idea this bug existed. And we got that after 20 hours of preparing user tests, running them, and then analyzing. And they were really happy to get this type of feedback as well, and kind of want to do more of it. So with that, I want to say that, yeah, every little step that you take towards understanding your users, it will help guide your product in the right direction. Because it puts a lot of things in perspective, and you get a different understanding for the people on the other side of the screen, basically. It can also lower the amount of emotional arguments that you have in your team. If everyone is arguing based on assumptions, like we think users do this and therefore we should do this thing here, and you have a different opinion, it can be difficult situations. And even though I work with user experience and user research, I encounter this quite often, because in so many places there's not enough user research being done. So what can you do? Well, if you are one of the persons who raised your hand because your company actually does user research, maybe just ask if you can join some sessions. Listen in, get an understanding. And if they don't, like if your company actually doesn't do that, well, then there are some small things that I would recommend that you can try out. So the easiest one, I would say, or one of the easiest ones, is running a small usability test, where you start by inviting users. You can either invite actual users, like of your app, if you have a user pool, or you can use some organization that provides you with users, with test users. I would recommend that you do a face-to-face user test, because you get a lot more from it, from the discussions around it and everything. Then when you're preparing the test, you should give the users a task to complete. So you write a test script. Let's say it was for a hotel booking app. Then you could say you're going to Paris for a conference sometime in April. And then the user should book a hotel for this in the app. And it's as easy as having them go through this process of trying to book the hotel and see where they stumble, or if they stumble, or you ask them to tell you how they find the app, what they're going through, if something is odd, if they're hesitating. And then you take lots of notes, and basically what you can do is, you don't need to make as many or so many tests, actually. If you make a test with like 6 to 8 users, you will still find the biggest usability issues. And 45 minutes per user, you can also do a bit less. It depends what you're testing. But yeah, just trying this out. It will take you maybe, okay, in the initial sessions, it might take a bit more, but maybe 2 to 3 days. That's all. But then, for more lightweight test, you could do a Guerrilla usability test, and that basically means you go to a cafe or a shopping center, and you kind of ask people who seem to not have too much to do at the moment, if they have a moment, and if you can show them an app that you've been working on. For this, you prepare the same type of test script, or not as detailed maybe, but you give them a task to perform in your app, and you ask them what they do. And these sessions are usually shorter. It's like 15 minutes or so, because people who are not necessarily invited to you might not want to spend so much time with you. This gives, of course, a different type of feedback than an ordinary user test, but it's still very valuable and it takes less time. And basically, except for the time it takes you, there's no additional cost. Then there's the even more lightweight method, the support route, which I call it. And this is like a continuous feedback or a continuous discussion with users. Basically, well, you probably know already that by responding to reviews, you can change the, like if it's a positive to a negative review. But you can, by responding and getting in touch with users that have reached out to you, you can start getting some feedback from them. And if it's over the Play Store, you can ask them to send you an email to provide more information. And when you've started that conversation, you can ask them for more. And usually, as soon as they get a response, they're quite happy to actually talk to you. They're glad that someone is responding. So I usually ask them, like, okay, can you tell me a bit about how you would be using that feature that you're requesting? So this is how a few of those examples that I showed you before happened, actually. And then the last part that I've been doing lately is I set up a Google form. And at the end of these discussions that we have, like these support errands or so, we ask them like, hey, we are trying to understand our users a little bit better, and we would love your feedback. Here's a form with like a couple of questions. So if you have time, we would really love your input. And by doing that and asking them at that point in time when we've already talked to them, the response rate is sky high. And so what I wanted to say is, I think you should all try to do some of the user research, try to understand your users a little bit better, and I think from that your apps will become better. That's it. Thank you.
Questions, please come back. Don't forget that there is a party tonight. You can find the venue inside the app. And otherwise, see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.